Hi, everybody. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Glad you're here. To our streamers, we're having from 30 to 60 streamers every Sunday for this event, which is thrilling. I'm so grateful for the generosity that provided us the money so that we could bring this room into streaming capacity. You know, sometimes you know whether you're in a mega church by how sharp their technology is, right? Okay, so I don't need to make that joke. You got it. So now an introduction to what we're doing during the summer. And everybody said, "Oh, Ed, nobody comes to church in the summertime. They just go to Highlands or Cashers or something like that, or to St. Simon's." Welcome back. And but I know better. So we are having this summer experience of exercising our deep listening muscles and the muscles of this being a big tent church where you don't have to be in lockstep with one another in the way we think in order to belong. No, there are a lot of different organs and limbs in the body. So says Paul, and this is an experience for us to show that to one another so that we can have that experience. At the same time, we get educated about some very nuanced, complicated, intractable issues in our life. Because Jesus said, put first the kingdom of God or the reign of God or the way love works when it has its way, and everything else is going to be added to you. So that's what we want to do in terms of all these issues. So Linda and Louis McLeod, who are back from Spain, thank God, just before they got on the plane, told us about deep listening. So you can go to the website and learn all of the essential skills that we are trying to put into exercise here. And one of the first ones was that our brains, in a nanosecond, figure out whether a context is safe or threatening. And that we then just reflexively go into one or another direction. Now, last week, we had a blessed saint who stood up and said, "Ed, I am safe here, right?" And I said, "Absolutely." And then she had a very different perspective than we had given expression to. And it was roundly received with warmth and affirmation. And then I got not a few emails on Monday expressing the same kind of thing. And my response was, "Oh my God, thank you very, very much." So I simply want to say that the Episcopal Church has taken a stand on this very gnarly issue of reproductive choice. And what it has, bottom line, said is that the act of choice should not be taken away, but the church doesn't have the right, nor any priest, to tell somebody before really kind of getting into it what you should do. One of the persons who wrote me said, "Ed, my experience is that all of you Episcopal clergy just think that abortion is great and you go there immediately. And I simply want to testify that I simply don't know of an Episcopal priest or a leader in the Episcopal Church who thinks that. Nobody has ever been a counselor and an advisor and guide without pointing out this is real life. And you do have to struggle with the issue of, if you were to choose to end this life, is that murder? Or, in the case of non-viability, not? But there is no cookie cutter formula. So that's not what we're giving you this Sunday or last Sunday. I have never counseled somebody who was in the throes of that and their decision went both ways, who didn't weep over all of this. And I've never counseled somebody who has chosen to end their pregnancy, who didn't live with the pain 20, 25, 30, 35 years later. So we're simply not dealing with slap happy choices here. And I get that people have criticized pro-choice positions as endorsing abortion as a birth control method. I simply, with all the integrity I can muster, must tell you, I've never known anybody who has counseled somebody who had that mentality. There has been a sense of taking your feet off, taking your shoes off, we're on holy ground here. So it's with that, oh, and one other thing, another really important critique that I got in the email. By the way, parenthetically, Brad, we are a bright group of people who like to use email to have a conversation with the rector. Keep it up. I can handle it. Keep your emails coming. That one person said, I just want to give testimony to how wonderful it is when there is a very problematic pregnancy. When someone chooses to have a baby and then offer it for adoption. That oftentimes is the golden grace that comes into the life of another couple. So I just want to name all those things and to say that nobody has a quick fix, formula, recipe for figuring all this out. All of this is here, but because we are so different at St. Luke's and humanity is so different, we want to accommodate all these different experiences and different positions. And when we have our last 20 minutes today, which I hope we get to, we will want you to voice that. Now, the people who are with me today are Representative Park Cannon, who represents St. Luke's Church in the state legislature. So we've got our own state representative here, and Allison Stuffer-Kopp, who is the president of Georgia NOW and is an executive with Vox Communications, and she's a member of St. Luke's and wrote an editorial in the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, and Melita Easters, who is the founding chair and executive director of Georgia, who raised her 2 daughters at St. Luke's. She has 5 grandchildren. These are people who know this issue from the inside out, and we simply want to hear from them. Will you please warmly welcome all of them? Oh, you were handed a lot of information on the way in. We're not going to cover it all, but I simply wanted you to know that the Episcopal Church has been doing all of this for a long time, working on this issue. And the church where I worked for 21 years before coming here, both in the 80s and then after I was the rector, the vestry voted for this position, which they wanted to name prayerfully pro-choice, because they didn't want to get across that this is in any way an act of birth control, and to raise up the issue that women are the moral agents in this issue. And one of the things that I really want to underscore is how women are ceremoniously dismissed and not heard from when we get to the legislative area of this debate. And this was to hold up women as moral agents. Now, having said that, let me turn to our panel with my eye on the clock. So, Representative Cannon, thank you for being here. It's so nice to have you. Good morning. Mm-hmm. Would you please tell us about the numbers around the reproductive freedom choices. What can you share with us about the actual decline in the number of abortion procedures in recent years? Welcome.
Thank you. Good morning. I am so happy to be here. This is my second time here. I have been moving around this month for Pride Month, so my voice is a little more hoarse than I would hope. But I open my heart to you in prayer, and I really am happy to be in community with you today. I'm a member at Ebenezer Baptist Church, where my grandparents were members, and my family is all in the church. And so I want to come at this issue and help you understand that I look at this from a person who works in the clinic, from a person who understands the procedure personally, from someone who works on policy, and from someone who's doing research specifically on this issue right now. I actually work in pathology as well as in procedure, which means I'm in the operating room. And so whether or not I believe that life begins at conception or not, I'm really coming at this issue with just some facts. So I want to thank you for even lifting that up in this space. So the first is really that we can say that access to abortion is declining. And the reason that we can say it's been the lowest since 1973, when Roe versus Wade was decided, was actually because of policy and state making and national climates around this. We know, of course, that by doing research in over 30 states, having over 6,000 participants this year alone, and for putting money in the state budget for maternal mortality and really coming at this from multiple angles, the fact is that there are less than 1 million procedures per year. And with that, the upwards percentage are people who are over the age of 30. And so when we look at those numbers demographically, we can see the procedure is declining for some specific groups. Non-Latino white women, additionally for some who have college education. But that's not true for everyone. And I think many of us in this room can agree that perhaps national or state policy making, legislating abortion access does not really get at the true need. The true need is that in Georgia, over the past 8 years, that's one governor, but 2 terms, we've gone from providing service to families in need from 26 weeks in 2012 to 24 weeks in 2013 to 22 weeks in 2015 to 6 weeks in 2020. So over that 8-year period, access and the need to access still persists among the majority groups. But in fact, we're reversing the ability to legally access that.
Thank you so much. Mm-hmm. I want now, pardon me, we want to come back to you.
Okay.
But because we started a little late, I want to ask Allison about her op-ed piece in April 27. You asserted the passage of Georgia's HB 481 abortion ban was about power, not health. Can you unpack that?
Yes, I can. And thank you guys so much for being here today. I know this is a very tough issue, but it's so important that we're all here together and having an open dialogue. So why this bill is about power is for a few things. One is kind of what Park was just explaining here. There are already so many hurdles to having an abortion to begin with. And right now, 96% of counties in Georgia do not offer a clinic for that type of care if a woman chooses to go down, to take that option for her. Another thing too is there are a lot of policies put in place that make it difficult for women, again, to access abortion care and also shame women into the decision that they have a right to. So this includes forced ultrasounds, this includes waiting periods, informed consent, unnecessary medical clinic regulations that prevent clinics from opening. So that's one reason. Number two is, which I think is one of the most important, is public polling. So 7 in 10 Georgians believe that abortion should be legal and that the government should stay out of the decision making of that. So that if you take a look at that, that shows that there is a minority who is legislating over what public polling says, right? So that should be a concern to Georgians as well. And then lastly, if this was a policy that was really supposed to make our state better and stronger and women healthier, we would have, this bill would address our maternal mortality issues and the fact that about half of our counties do not have an OBGYN. And I think that's very important for us to remember.
Thank you very much. Can you say just a few words about kind of next steps?
Mm-hmm. So we discussed a little bit of this last week, and I think Melita will be able to shed a little more light on this, but we are definitely looking, or many groups in Georgia are trying to identify candidates, pro-choice candidates, that we can replace with the legislators who voted for this bill. The ACLU, along with Planned Parenthood Southeast and Sister Song, a few other organizations, just filed a federal lawsuit against this policy. So we are in the beginning stages of a long legal battle, and it's important to remember that this bill was written to attract a Supreme Court challenge. There's some very questionable, pieces of details in this bill. So again, we're just getting started.
I'm compelled to just, Melita, we're not here, and I think that most leaders are not motivated by wanting to have more abortions. But what the motivating kind of coordinating, organizing value is that the choice to have an abortion is not taken away. So that's a nuance, and I think it's a really important one. This is about choice. So as you continue to hear that, please understand that that's what's been driving this conversation here this Sunday and last Sunday. So Melita has been so very, very helpful in helping me set up all this stuff now. So Melita, will you talk about I'm new to return to Georgia, and you know about the political situation in Georgia and how it's different from other states. We get lumped with Mississippi, Alabama, and a whole bunch of others. And could you just kind of talk about close vote versus huge margins, et cetera?
Yes, I'll be happy to. Thank you. And I think before I even get into that answer to Ed's question, part of what this whole debate is about is the idea that there is a separation in the Constitution between church and state. And is it the right of some religions to legislate their belief about when life begins for the rest of us? In the beginning, abortion was seen as a Catholic issue. Even W.A. Criswell, the former president of the Southern Baptist Convention, used to say, "I have always felt it was only after a child was born and had a life separate from its mother that it became an individual person." So even the Southern Baptist Convention was not at first, in the early days of Roe v. Wade, opposed to abortion. It was after Bob Jones University's tax-exempt status was lifted because they had banned interracial dating on campus that the moral majority was formed. So then the fundamentalists in the Protestant religions aligned themselves with Catholics. So there are a lot of states who have recently passed these abortion bans. Georgia is the closest vote. In the House, the abortion ban passed, the 6-week ban passed really with the leisure of only one vote. The difference is that we've been making a concerted effort in Georgia to elect pro-choice Democratic women to the state legislature. So in Georgia, we now rank 20th in the nation for the percentage of women in our legislature. 30.5% of our legislature are women. By contrast, in Alabama, only 15.7% of their legislature is women. In Georgia, the Democratic women outnumber their Republican colleagues 3.3 to 1. In Alabama, it's only 2 Democratic women to 1 Republican woman. So when there are more women to speak eloquently about the need to have the choice, and young women like Park and Jasmine, who you met last week, and Beth Moore, another freshman, all spoke very eloquently from the well about this issue. But one of the most interesting speeches in the Senate, everybody probably who's real close and tight with this issue has seen snippets of Jen Jordan's speech because it was so eloquent. But Gloria Butler, who's in her late 70s, I would say, but doesn't look it, she spoke eloquently about the fact that in the early days of pre-Roe v. Wade, contraception was just beginning, really. The pill had just been invented, and those of us who are as old as me remember, or older, remember that it took a while for them to figure out the dose of the pill. Contraception is a much easier thing these days than it was back in the days when Roe v. Wade was decided. The other thing is that abortion procedures themselves are very different than when Roe v. Wade was decided. The majority of abortions now take place with 2 pills, not in the surgical suite. It's a pill you take one day, another pill you take the second day, and then you have what amounts to a lot of cramps and a tough menstrual cycle. And most of those abortions take place prior to 12 weeks and with 2 pills. So technology has changed. And one of the concerns about if abortion is outlawed at 6 weeks, what then happens to all of those people who've just taken the 2 pills? Do you push that now pure pharmaceutical product that's heavily regulated into the streets with the same people who put fentanyl in illegal drugs? So there's a lot of questions. So the solution that my group and other groups see is defeating the Republicans who voted against the bill and against the will of the people in their district based on polling, replacing them by electing more women, having those women repeal 481 in Georgia, even as the court challenges pass. And when you elect more women, then bills like this in the future don't get through the legislature. And so that's the defeat, elect, repeal. And just, it kind of got lost in the news, but on Friday, the Supreme Court refused to hear the lower court rejection of the Alabama abortion ban. So this strategy of trying to get the bills in front of the Supreme Court is being struck down by district courts along the way. And that's the hope that what will happen in Alabama will also happen to the Georgia bill. The thing that's interesting is that in some states, the Catholic Church has actually opposed these lawsuits because they know that once the courts strike down these abortion bills, then state tax money has to go to repay the ACLU for the attorney fees. So the taxpayers of Alabama have just spent $2 million defending the abortion ban they knew was illegal the minute they passed it. And that's what our Georgia Attorney General will do. He will fan out the defense of the abortion ban that they knew was unconstitutional when they passed it to very silk-stocking law firms in town, and they will churn up a lot of money at state taxpayer expense, defending a law they know is unconstitutional, and then when and if the courts overturn it, the ACLU gets a nice big check from your tax money as a reimbursement.
Thanks, Melita. So I want everybody to take a deep breath and understand that we're here to talk about ideas and thoughts and feelings. We're not here to denounce. It is not okay to blame, shame, and attack yourself or anybody else. That's just illegal here at St. Luke's. But it's great to have a critique of a way people think. That's the essence of the prophets in the Bible, is that they were critiquing the thinking of the empire. So that's what we're here to do. Take a deep breath. If you have not delinked thinking from persons, or as Saint Frank Sinatra said, doobie doobie doo. We're not here to address anybody's being, but the doing and the choices, okay? Now, my goal as interim rector in many ways is to present education experiences like this so that we never can get around to all the questions that people have and you want to come back for more. Now, next week we're going to be talking about homelessness, and then we're going to hear from the search committee, and later in July we're going to hear about the death penalty. And then in August we're going to start up with the full program year. But we're going to continue this throughout, and they're all going to be just as compelling as these. Now, I promised Lee Sewell, who I didn't recognize last time, she cornered me, and she said, can I have the first stab at the mic this time? So I want to go to Lee, and then we'll have a show of hands.
I wanted to respond to the last comment that was made at the last session, and I understand that Ed cut it off for a time thing. I guess those 10 o'clock people need communion too. I wanted to say that I particularly disagreed with two of her assertions. One, that contraception is available to all, and secondly, that her view and her faith should override mine or someone else's. The facts that I look at are that there is a lack of prenatal care, particularly in Georgia and across most of the South and the U.S. One of our panel members last week told us that 79 of 159 counties in Georgia don't have an OBGYN, and those same counties don't have any public transportation, so a poor person or a person who doesn't drive can't get 5 counties over for treatment. African American women in our state die 4 times more than other women in childbirth. I think, for me, my observation is, as a volunteer in various organizations, that all versions of contraception are not being taught objectively or fully in the school system, publicly or privately. And contraception, when it is taught, is frequently taught with prejudice and without scientific basis. And I absolutely respect her right to a view in her faith. But I want to be allowed, I and anyone else, to the right to our own decision. And like Ed, I know from friends who have suffered abortions, it's not something anyone has done lightly.
Thank Thank you very much. Hold your hands up if you want to speak. And Renee, I'm totally with you. I think that was not exactly what you said. Okay, yeah, please.
Okay, so I know I have cousins who are very involved in the anti-abortion movement. They're Roman Catholic, but the thing that I have, and so I used to be totally anti, and then the situation happened. I wasn't pregnant, but I thought I might be, and I'm like, oh my God, I cannot have this child. So when you walk in those shoes, it may be that your view changes. Another thing too is, so if they're anti-abortion and they vote anti-abortion, then what are these men doing for women who are extremely at risk being pregnant? What are they doing? I work with refugees and I work in low SES schools as a school psychologist. What are they doing for all the children that are born? And I know adoption is a great thing, but have you had a black child, a black boy, and tried to adopt him out? You know, that's not an easy thing to do. So, and in some cultures, like in the refugee community, you just don't do that.
Thanks, Betty. I've got your question. I'm going to come all to you at the end of several questions, okay? But I want everybody to be heard, please. A variety of voices, please.
My heart is beating really fast, which I understand from Father Ed. That's the Holy Spirit. So, Ed, because I trust you, I'm going to question an idea that you put forth in the beginning, and that is that, and I love you. So I'm not questioning your experience. I'm positive that all of the women you've spoken to about having made this decision do feel some level of guilt or something negative. But from what I understand, and you ladies would probably have more accurate information than I do, but from what I understand, the majority of women who have been through this procedure feel relief and not guilt. And I just wonder if it may do women a little bit of a disservice to assume that having abortions is bad for their mental health. And I want to ask the room if you feel some sort of relief upon hearing that women feel bad about what they have done. I just want to question whether there is something in us that feels a need not just to control what women do with their bodies, but also that they suffer as a result of their decisions. So that's it. Thank you.
Can we hear some applause for difference of opinion? You don't have to agree. It's just about a difference of opinion. Let's go to this side. Who's got a hand up on this side? Please, sir.
Okay, good morning. As probably one of the few guys, I think, that's talked to this, I'll step off the plank and get into the deep water. One, couple things. I hear about public polling. Well, most of the public, when you look at the man on the street interviews, doesn't even know who the vice president is. So I get a little concerned when I hear that being used as a basis. I'm also concerned, I believe there's a law in the books that says if a woman who is pregnant is killed, either in an automobile accident or somebody shoots them, it's not a charge of one death, it's two, because the life inside is viewed as a human being. So we may have a conflict in this. If you have a human being inside the body at that point, but not at the other, you may have to resolve that through the legislature. I don't know how to do that. Also, viability. That was a big thing that came up last time. I would contend that viability doesn't even stop in the womb. We had a baby that was found early this week up in the Forsyth Woods, wrapped in plastic, who had been newly born and was not going to be viable if left alone. It still takes care and concern and all that other stuff. 1-year-old, 2-year-old, 15-year-old, in my grandson's case, who just got his learner's permit. So that's a viability issue. So I just bring up some of those points. But other than that, I'm done. Thank you.
Thanks, Charlie. Breathe deep. Y'all make notes now. We're going to come back to you, okay? But we're going to take 2 or 3 more questions. Please, Carol.
I hear what. Oh, okay. I hear what you're saying about electing more women to the legislature. That could possibly make a difference. But could you talk a little bit about gerrymandering in Georgia? Because what's happening is that instead of voters choosing their representatives, the representatives are choosing the voters. And just recently, the last two decisions by the Supreme Court brought back a decision on gerrymandering, I think in North Carolina, sent it back to the state. So how do you envision our really working through this?
Okay.
I'm an old man, one of 7 children. My wife and I had 4 children. I know a lot about kids. There was always a little baby in our house because I was the second. I think it's a terrible thing to bring an unwanted child into the world.
Thank you very much. We're going to keep going. Judith? Y'all taking notes, right? Y'all taking notes?
I just have 2 points. One is the life of the woman and any child she conceives is completely and totally entangled, and to pretend that we can somehow divide that is arrogance, and whatever decision comes out is going to be messy. Also, not only is the life of that woman involved, but the life of her other children and her husband and her family are also involved, and often those are not considered. And plus, I just want to make a note that I am totally anti-abortion, but I am also pro-choice. And I do not I think the 2 sides are totally talking past each other, because being pro-choice has no inference on your attitudes towards abortion. It's simply recognizing this as too complicated a decision for the courts and outsiders, and something we need to trust mothers to do. They won't always make choices we agree with, but I think that's where the choice belongs.
Thank you. I'm going to try to get all the questions, but I just have to parenthetically observe, my God, if the person that the Holy Spirit has chosen to be the new rector, and she or he doesn't even know it yet, but listened into this, they would be so excited about the possibility of being the rector of a place like this that has all this difference of opinion. I mean, I've got to hear a lot of other voices.
I just want to say there's some really interesting writing coming out about people I read something from a woman who grew up in foster care, who says that the adoption option is really not an option based on her experience, that she would never wish that on someone. So,
thank you. Very quickly, and then we got to go to our panel and wrap up because I got to go preach.
Okay, my heart is truly fibrillating. So I'm saying this with love, but I've got some alphabet letters going. This is coming from choice, civil rights, culture, and Christianity. I'm a woman. I'm very concerned with this young woman here talking about gerrymandering, but I'm concerned that I feel we're living in an enslaved country. I say that we are in a pre-fascist state. And what's happening is it's pulling the rug under us on all levels. And this is just the tip of the iceberg. And my concern is that we are not aware of the power pulls and the choices that we do have, and we're not speaking up. And my concern is it's enslavement on a woman across the board.
Other hands? Yes, please.
As someone who's been in adoption for 45 years, as someone who's been in the field of adoption for 45 years, those black infants have loads of families to adopt them. Black boys, black girls, Hispanic, Caucasian. But I don't think that's the issue. I hear a lot of, but there are so many families wanting children. That shouldn't be the reason that we are not pro-choice. Because those people, they do want to adopt, but that isn't the reason we take away someone's rights.
Carol, I'm coming to you to ask the last question, and then we're going to hear from the panel, and then we're going to go worship the Lord.
No, I just want to respond to what Brad said, because I don't know if any of you remember. Was it just this week, earlier this week, we found a baby in Cobb County? Yeah, Forsyth County, with umbilical cord still there, wrapped in plastic, which means they wanted this baby to die. And I thought, this is probably someone who did not have the choice or the ability to do what was right by that child. Because one of the things about a lot of the evangelists, a lot of the Christians, quote unquote, who think abortion is such a good, not being pro-choice is such a great idea, is that they don't seem to care about the babies. They don't seem to care about what happens to these children whose mothers have no choice.
Mark, hi.
Hi.
Tag, you're it.
Oh, I am so happy to be here. I really am. This is such a stretch this morning. Just want to thank you for your faith. Just to respond to a few of the specific questions. So $2 million a year go to crisis pregnancy centers from the state of Georgia. This year, $500,000 was allocated to the Morehouse School of Medicine to focus on some study groups around maternal mortality. I have the fiscal note right here, my letter that I requested, over $10 million, $500,000 is a disgrace. It is personal to me. I work with the OBGYN Society. Suffering, that conversation, it is not safe for Black women to give birth here. The statistic is 3 times we perish. And so I want to thank you for lifting up race in this space. It is a space that we need you to be called into in other places to talk about race-based issues in healthcare as it relates to Black birth and the foster care system. There are 14,000 kids in foster care in Georgia right now. And I personally have been trying to work to find out information about things that have been going on, and it's very challenging. And so I hope that if you're interested in working closer towards that system, that your faith will move you towards that. We do need to trust women as much as I do believe having more colleagues who will stand with me. For example, my colleague who is the first foster care kid ever elected in the state of Georgia, and we cannot find anyone else in the South who is willing to say that openly, who is 7 months pregnant right now, who was pregnant the whole session, who was completely discarded. In this conversation, we tried as much as we could to bring faith back in. There are groups, Faith Aloud, Faith Out Loud, that help with prayer for these types of conversations. And so I send you forth towards those resources as you continue to do this work spiritually and in the public face.
Thanks, Mark. Allison and Melita, you have 3 minutes. Together.
Well, Melita, I think you wanted to touch
All
on
right,
gerrymandering.
well, let me speak to the gerrymandering thing, because basically gerrymandering is a tool which has grown increasingly sophisticated because of the ability of computerized data manipulation. Gerrymandering is the tool Republicans in charge have been able to use to keep their power. So the people we elect in the 2020 election cycle are the people who, provided the census takes place, given some of the recent presidential proclamations, provided the census takes place in a timely fashion, the people who are elected in 2020 will draw the maps for the 2022 and beyond election cycle. So, as you said, gerrymandering is a tool which has allowed legislators to choose their voters instead of voters choosing their legislators. The thing that I remind you goes back to what Mary Margaret Oliver said a few weeks ago. Voting matters. And sometimes people are elected not so much by the people who voted for them or for their opponent, but by the people who chose not to vote at all. So the best way to end this conversation is to remind everybody that your vote matters and the votes of all your friends matter. And just as we used to say, friends don't let friends drive drunk, friends don't let friends not vote.
Thank you. Allison, any other word?
I think my final comment would be that when I'm thinking a lot about this debate, and many pro-choice advocates would say that choice means that women have control over their biological destiny, and without that choice, we are not free. And we've said this data point in different ways today, but one that I read recently was that complications with pregnancy are the 6th leading cause of death of women in the nation. So again, with choice, women have control over their destiny, and again, we are not free without that choice.
Thanks. So, let me just underscore some things. This is a both-and church. This is a big tent church. And you have to wrap your mind around things like Judith said, to be anti-abortion and pro-choice. And you have to wrap your mind around the fact that this is not a political party in this church. So whenever you hear the words Republican or Democrat or Independent, that is not the stance of this church. We are engaged because Jesus tells us to pray, "Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven," which means that you have to talk about policy, but you must not talk about partisan politics. So I have been through that journey, my brothers and sisters, with the IRS breathing down my neck. And I knew what the red line was, and we prevailed. And it's all about making sure that you're not partisan. So this ain't a partisan church, and I will guard that with my life. I have been so thrilled at this conversation. I hope that anybody who felt unsafe feels a little safer and will come back, because absolutely everybody in this room and everybody on streaming is loved here. And that is the most important thing we can say. So come back next week, and we'll talk about homelessness with Tony from Crossroads. Help me with his last name. Johns. These name tags are important because there are people in rector places who can't remember names, and these name tags. Get your name tag out there. And now let's all go to church and get a deep drink of love for being who we are. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, panel. I love you. I loved your being here, and I love your church and your preacher. I went to the mass incarceration conference.
Oh, you did? The other day ago, yeah.
Oh, my Lord.